Welcome to the second film in our Building Services series. In it, we look at the way in which building services are categorized. Building services is a very complex area, and it's therefore useful to organize it into various categories. We have considered the system that divides a building up into its constituent parts on 2 occasions during this module. Today, we're going to look at building services as part of the fit-out of a building. The subdivision shown here corresponds to the principle of selective seeing, which you are also already familiar with. Let's start by reminding ourselves of the principle. Selective seeing breaks a building down into its constituent parts in a conscious effort to analyze and make sense of them. This type of deconstruction helps improve our knowledge of the building construction from the design stage right through to the finished object. The same principle can be applied to building services by analyzing the consumers in a given space. Sockets, switches and lights belong to the electricity supply, air vents to the ventilation system, etc. This principle also forms the basis for DIN 276, the German standard that deals with cost planning in building construction. Starting at the planning stage, a building is meticulously broken down to ensure that nothing is forgotten at the cost calculation stage. Building services represents a group in its own right, separate from the division into shell construction, envelope and fit-out shown here. This is due to the fact that building services are planned by specialist engineers whose design outputs are subsequently integrated into the overall planning framework by architects. Together, cost groups 300 building structures and 400 building services describe the building. They are both further divided into subgroups. Cost Group 300 covers 8 different areas, Cost Group 400, 9. The subdivisions of the Building Services Cost Group corresponds to the distinctions that we have already discussed in terms of function and materials. The headings' names are simply a little more formal. The other category includes auxiliary plant such as site equipment. Take a look at the way in which the subgroups we have just seen are further divided into sub-subgroups. For example, 420 heat supply is subdivided into heat generation, heat distribution, and heating surfaces. The section of the standard shown here also indicates how certain items of plant and equipment are allocated to the cost groups. Heating pipes, for example, belong to heat distribution networks. Electricity, our second example, is clearly a more complex medium and is therefore divided into more subgroups. It starts with generators, that is to say transformers and self-generators, followed by low-voltage distribution boards within the building. Electricity distribution and consumption devices are further subdivided only for lighting. Lightning protection constitutes a separate category on its own. Summary. Building services is a very complex area, and it's therefore useful to organize it into various categories. This subdivision follows the principle of selective seeing. German standard DIN 276, which deals with cost planning in building construction, is also based on this principle. Building services are to be found in Cost Group 400 and its various subgroups. Please take a look at the third film in our Building Services series. In it, we consider the level of building services required in various types of building.